This is Fantology.
You may have heard of us.
All right, what's up, Babblers? This is Stephen, your host with Fantology, along with my lifelong friend Josh. And after long last, really, this is almost a disservice to this book, which we both really enjoyed. It's a disservice that's taken us so long to record a review of it, but we're going to be talking about R.F. Kuang, Rebecca Kuang's book, Babel or Babel, whichever you prefer. I'm going to go with Babel because that's just sounds a little more natural to me. But Josh, I mean, are you as excited as I am to finally talk about this book?
Yeah, I'm super excited. I've been pumped. And mostly the reason why it's taken us a long time to get this recorded is because of me. It took me a while to finish this one. Just life things. But I am very happy.
Well, I mean, to be fair, it's also taken me a while. I was in the midst of moving while reading the book, and it just get you life things.
Yeah. So, and honestly, when I really sat down to read this, the last 60% took me 2 days. So it really, this book can go really fast for you.
It's a good
was my
endorsement.
experience, at least. Yeah. Which I don't think I've ever really sat down and read a book in one day. Actually, I did do that once with one of the Pendragon books. I read one of those in one day.
Yeah, like when we were kids, that was
Yeah.
a lot more common to, when life worries were not nearly as present. It's a lot easier to just pound through a book in 1-2 days. But yeah, it is a little more rare as an adult.
Yeah. So I watched one vlog of reading this book reading this book specifically in 24 hours. I'm like, oh, that would be nice to do. But and I'm sure a lot of people can. I'm not a very fast reader. But anyway, that's a big aside. I really like this book. So I'm very excited to talk about it.
So we are familiar with Rebecca Kuang from her Poppy War trilogy, which you read the whole trilogy as well, right?
I actually did not. No.
Okay. So what's up with that?
Let's see. I'm trying to remember. I think I was reading it in tandem with First Law, and I read the first book and enjoyed it. And I started reading the second book. I wasn't enjoying it as much. And it was just a lot of, I don't know if dark is the right word, but a lot of hard things are happening.
Dark is the right word. Yeah, they're dark books.
Yeah. So I just,
I mean, you said you're reading First Law at the same time, so I don't know what your excuse is though.
Well, that's what I mean. It was like I would read a First Law book, and then I would read one of these books, and then it was just I just had to kind of stop one of them. And so it's been on my TBR. I didn't stop it because I wasn't enjoying it. I just stopped it because it wasn't working for me when I was reading it. So I'm sure I'll pick him up. But when I saw this, this was coming out, I was super excited about it because I did enjoy her writing and enjoyed the first book a lot.
So we may have some general comparisons to the Poppy War trilogy because there are some legit comparisons. There's a lot of comparisons, but we won't do plot specific spoilers, at least not at first. We want to, we recognize that maybe there's a lot in our community that haven't read the book yet because it is fairly recent. It came out end of August, I want to say, kind of towards the end of August. So it's only been a month. So I think this is one that maybe people have seen around. So hopefully, at least in the first few minutes here, no spoilers for either Babel or the Poppy War trilogy. And let's talk about it kind of high level. So what is this book? Who would be interested?
So first, I think this one is interesting because, first of all, it's not really calling it a fantasy book, while technically correct. I don't think is the best description of it. Yeah. It was housed in the fantasy. I went and bought a hardcover, which I don't usually do, so that should tell you how much I liked it. But it was housed in the fantasy section of Barnes and Noble. But I'd for sure more categorize it as a historical fiction with some fantasy elements.
It's historical fantasy, which I think is a sub genre.
Yeah,
I guess.
But it's not okay. I read this review on Goodreads about oh, she didn't even take the time to really consider how the magic would really affect society, and it's that. That's not the purpose.
Wait, what? Well, she does.
What kind of
part? It's a big part of the book.
Okay, so his point was there's quotes about from books at the time that other authors had written, and so the review was you mean to tell me that if this technology existed or if this magic existed, then that author would have written the quote the same way, written that poem the same way, there's no way, kind of that kind of criticism where
man, yeah, it feels like you're determined to hate the book if you're taking it apart to that level.
Yeah, I guess. But like other things, it's not like it didn't change society all that much. Like there's a magic system in here. This is still non-spoiler, so we don't go too much into it, but like it can make things run a little bit better. So like there's still a train and car, like trains and cars and like kind of like those type of things, but they just run a little bit, or not cars, but there weren't cars yet in this, were there? It was like
mostly
like
I think there were like motor cars, maybe. Can't remember exactly.
Anyway,
but yeah, I mean, we can just talk about the magic a little bit because people are always interested in that. So, like Josh said, like it's mostly technological magic almost, and the way the magic works is it's on the backbone of translation between languages. So you have different languages, and you inscribe translations of different words into silver bars. Specifically, silver is like this magical material in this version of Earth, and by doing this, I mean, we probably don't want to get too into like the weeds of it, but there is a technique in doing this that allows a lot of kind of commonplace things to be improved and provides for effects. And this is how the British Empire has become really powerful, because they have not exclusive knowledge to this, but they have more access to silver, and it gets into the whole kind of global economy and colonialism, which is a huge part of the book, which we'll talk about quite a bit.
Yeah. So anyway, but it is focused a lot more on historical themes than it is on like the magic system. The magic system is a way to explore the themes that you talked about, like colonialism, racism, like other. The magic system explores the themes instead of having the themes determined by the magic system, if that makes sense. Like in other common fantasy works, like it's like, oh, here's a magic system, let's see how it shapes all of society and then build our themes around how that happens. You know what I mean? Which I don't feel like this works in the same way. The other thing that's kind of interesting is like Poppy War was for sure an adult fantasy book. This it's not YA, but it doesn't seem as adult as like typical, like as the Poppy War did to me, at least. I saw one
it's review. Not as dark, like
it's not as dark.
There's not as much. It's in a more it's in a more modern setting. There's just naturally like not as much brutality and death, you could say.
I saw one person categorize this as like a new adult book, if that makes sense. Like it's not a young adult book. It's like kind of like 18 to 23 might be like the target audience, like people like going to university, which is a big part of this as well.
I mean, I would hope that older than 23 as well are also open to the themes and ideas of the book.
For sure. But I think that would be like the market it's really aiming at, I guess. I don't know. But
because it still has that kind of like almost in most of the first half of the book, there's almost this, university setting, whimsical, kind of fun, adventurous. There's a lot of those types of beats, which are obviously going to resonate with that age group.
That's what I'm saying. It's kind of like an adult Harry Potter type thing, but not as adult as like The Magicians, if you read that series, but like where, these kids are meet each other, form a bond, and are going to school and exploring kind of those themes and those beats. And so like it, and even just like swearing, like there's maybe a handful of swear words throughout the book.
Right.
Like, it's not like in First Law when there's a, swear words scattered across every page. Just kind of like that. Like I could see this being in high school classrooms, being assigned as like book reports. And I think that would be great. But like, but I couldn't see like that happening with First Law. You know what I mean?
Right. Because of the themes that we're exploring, because they're real world themes and ideas that are, I think, important to consider. And I think that's what we'll spend, the majority of the time talking about once we actually get into the spoiler part of the review. And
so another kind of thing that might turn some people off, which I think is kind of a shame, but like if quote unquote woke things like trigger you, then this book isn't for you. And maybe, I mean, if you're open to having like a conversation about it with yourself, like internally, and like you might not agree with everything that's in here or how things are presented, but like if you
Uh-huh.
just like don't even want to engage with like woke things or like issues of identity and how like people's identity and race and culture interface with like colonialism, then like I think you'd just be mad the entire time reading it. Not to say that, like you shouldn't read it, but like I don't know, like I just wouldn't go recommend this to some of my friends that are not that might be that post certain things on Facebook and stuff. You know what I mean?
Like and I think we'll try not to be too far into the weeds of politics, but it's going to be hard, because this is the majority of the book material. But I would just back that up, Josh, by saying, like, if you're someone who, if your mindset is that colonialism was a great thing because it brought all these countries into the modern era, and almost like the British Empire was the more modernized version, and they were doing almost a service to other countries, like that idea is going to be challenged like really heavily. So if you're not open to thinking about that a bit more, then you're going to disagree. Like you say, you're going to disagree with most of the book.
Yeah. And like there's a lot of discussion about race. There's one example where one of the characters, and if you're really sensitive to spoilers, then maybe skip. It's really not a big spoiler, but like one of the characters is coming to realize some things that other characters who are different races and ethnicities have come to face, and she like kind of breaks down and cries, and then is comforted by the other people who are of different races. And then the chapter ends with like, and there's a sense of unease because why is she the one that needs to be comforted right now? And so it kind of ends with this like, I wouldn't classify it as like white guilt, but like here's this white person that's experiencing like these emotions and needs to be comforted. And that is kind of how sometimes society handles discussions of racism, is like if it makes the white person feel uncomfortable, then something may have gone wrong and they need to be coddled or something, like along those lines. And so like if that's going to trigger you, then just skip the book, I guess.
And the cool thing about this book is, so Rebecca Kuang is actually younger than us. I think she's like 26, 27 right now, which is pretty remarkable because this is a really well-written and well-researched and cool book. But she's also she was born in China and spent some time in the States and spent some time in Oxford. And so you get the sense that a lot of this, I mean, it would be really cool to talk to her about this. And I imagine she probably has, if we looked around for it more. But you get the sense that a lot of this is kind of built on her worldview, which is cool because it seems real, authentic and accurate, and it's cool to get a different perspective like that.
So I'll just read her little blurb because you gave that background. For those of you that aren't familiar with her, she's a Marshall Scholar, which I don't really know what that means, translator and Hugo, Nebula, Locus, and World Fantasy Award nominated author, the Poppy War Trilogy. She has an MPhil, which I assume is Master's in Philosophy, in Chinese Studies from Cambridge, and an MSc in Contemporary Chinese Studies from Oxford, and is now pursuing a PhD in East Asian Languages and Literatures at Yale. So Cambridge, Oxford, Yale.
Pretty impressive person.
Pretty impressive, and written a best-selling series. In between those degrees. So and that brings us to another part of this non-spoiler section. Is there's a large amount of the book that's like, here's this word, here's the etymology behind this word. Maybe you see a footnote for more etymology behind this word, which is kind of important because it does, like we said, play into the magic system a little bit. But other times it's like just kind of an aside, and you see her kind of flexing her linguistic muscles a little bit, which I enjoyed because I'm really interested. I'm the type of person that'll be sitting in like a lecture or something and hear a word and then go like Google the etymology of that word and kind of go down that rabbit hole. So I enjoyed that. But if that sounds like boring and tedious and lame to you, then this book you might find a little bit boring.
And it's a footnote book, like you just said. So there are footnotes that if you're reading on the ebook, you can click on, or if you're reading the physical book, you can flip to the. Actually, I don't know.
It's at the bottom. It's at the bottom.
It's in the
pages.
bottom. Okay, yeah, that makes it easy.
Yeah, so you can just. There's so many footnotes, and now I'm trying to struggle to find a page that has a footnote. But anyway.
So what else do we need to say as far as non-spoiler? It follows the protagonist. It's kind of a coming of age, young boy goes to school, makes a group of friends. So the first half of the book seems pretty familiar if you've read much fantasy. Honestly, like Name of the Wind is maybe a little bit of a comp just because of some of the plot beats. But then about halfway through, it really shifts and dives hardcore into a lot of themes that we discussed. So that's, in that way, it's a little bit similar. It's a little similar to the Poppy War, at least the first book, where the main character Ren is kind of a student at this school. And then about halfway through, some stuff happens and it's like, okay, this is like really, really serious. And you get similar things here in Babel. And the other cool thing is the ideas and themes are also pretty similar because the nature of the conflict is similar. Like the Poppy War is fantastical China that's dealing with Chinese history and dealing with the influence of colonialism. And here we have, it's mostly set at Oxford, but it's also set in China a bit. And China is dealing with colonial history and the characters who are mostly growing up in England, but also of minority races and of descent from other countries that are subject to colonialism are having to kind of deal with this like split identity thing going on. And so there's a lot of, if any of that sounds interesting to you, that's kind of the nature of the conflict. And, like we said, I just found it to be really authentic and really well realized.
Yeah, for sure. Maybe if people are still on the fence, we'll give our scores now for it, and then that might help. I think that this is between like a 9 and a 9.5 book for me, at least. I really enjoyed it.
That's like really high.
Yeah. I mean, I don't go buy very many like hardcover books, but I went out and bought this one. There are some pacing issues that we'll talk about in our next section. And there's some other like character, like I wish some of the characters were a little bit more flesh out, but like I think that I think it's like a 9 or 9.5. Anyway, that's my take.
I also really enjoyed the book. If you couldn't pick up on that from previous comments, I'm gonna go maybe like a half point lower than you, between an 8.5 and a 9. It's a book that made me think and is gonna, kind of maybe continue to resonate with me and challenge some of my views about the world, which is awesome. And, a lot of the fantasy books we read are fun and enjoyable, and they've got some good themes and certainly, some things that have stuck with me. But this one maybe more so because it's got that real world connection, and it kind of challenges maybe your day to day a little bit more. Other fantasy I enjoy because it's like, almost for me, like it helps me just kind of feel better about myself, or I enjoy thinking about some of the themes and adventures from other people. But this one makes me just consider, like, what is it like to be, to live a different life and to live a life that I'm not familiar with at all, which I think are really valuable things. So if you're looking to maybe just challenge your worldview at all, like through the medium of a pretty enjoyable and very well written book, then I would recommend it.
For sure. I think for me, it does depend on the staying power of the book, how well it stays in my mind, how well it continues to resonate with me like years down the road. I plan to do a reread of it eventually. So, we'll see how that goes. So anyway, that's why I go like, between a 9 and 9.5. Like there's room for that to kind of wiggle as we go, but coming off of pretty freshly reading it, that's where I'm sitting at. And I totally agree. Like this helps me re-examine, views that I have and ways that I've seen the world, ways that I learned history. And, and it's interesting coming from a very American centric mindset, how that can get challenged and altered through fiction. It's a testament to like the genre that we love talking about, that it can do that. So anyway, there's, I think, our non-spoiler review.
Cool. All right. So if you've read the book, or if you're just weird and want to hear what we have to say about random books, I would say go read the book. Don't just listen to us talk about the book. Go read it. But okay, here we go into the spoilers. So